Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Manabites. I'm your host, John Snyder. Hope you are doing well. Today is Friday, October 4th, 2019. And today we have a doozy of a topic for you. Today we're going to discuss cannibalism. It's come up recently in a Newsweek article, and it was recently suggested as an option to combat the coming food shortages that climate change will bring about by a professor in Sweden. There was also a really bizarre event that happened in the past couple of days at an AOC meeting by a woman who suggested that we combat climate change and overpopulation by eating babies and eating our children. Now, that one is a little bit odd, and no, this is not an onion story. This is the real deal. So we're going to dive into that. A couple things about cannibalism. I've been doing some research. A little of it's some of it's kind of gory, but also some fascinating facts. So there are about 9 places where cannibalism still exists. Sure, we hear about oftentimes these one-off, the Jeffrey Dahmers or the people eating bath salts and going crazy. But on Earth, there are about 9 places where it still exists. We had the Foray group in Papua New Guinea that practiced cannibalism in the mid and maybe even latter parts of the 20th century, but they pretty much died off with the Kuru disease. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But one interesting fact, and this is from Cornell Law School page, is that in the United States, there are no laws against cannibalism per se, but most, if not all, states have enacted laws that indirectly make it impossible to legally obtain and consume the body matter. Murder, for instance, is a likely criminal charge regardless of any consent. Further, even if someone consents to being eaten and kills himself, the cannibal may still be liable for criminal or civil actions based on laws governing the abuse or desecration of a corpse, which vary from state to state. So I guess technically, in some manners, it's not illegal. However, most of us probably can't even get our head and mind around wanting to do such a thing. Now, there was the Uruguayan soccer team that had their plane crashed in 1972 in the Andes. And as people were dying, and after they had died, some of the survivors did resort to eating the remains of the deceased. In my mind, that's a different case than what we're going to look at today because, that is, you're up thousands and thousands of feet, high altitude. There's nothing around you but snow and occasional, maybe leaf or twig here and there, but very, very little life is going to be there. So in my mind, that's a completely different scenario than what is being presented now in the last couple of weeks. So we're going to dive in and we're going to cover the speech by the professor out of Sweden, and we'll also look at the bizarre town hall meeting with AOC, as well as some other little tidbits. So thank you for joining, and I hope you enjoy this. Let's dive into the articles. So as I mentioned, the first article we'll take a look at is by a professor out of Sweden. This happened in September this year, who suggested eating human meat to tackle climate change. Here's one of the stories on the MSN page. Incidentally, I know a lot of people get uptight about fake news, and that's understandable. So I wanted to just show that this is a legitimate story. That's why I showed you the MSN page. Most people are familiar with MSN.com. However, this story does show up in dozens of sites, but the one I used might not be recognizable to you. But anyway, just wanted to throw that little caveat in there. So I actually liked the flow and the details of the story from the Epoch Times, so I'm going to use that one. Here the title is Swedish Behavioral Scientist Introduces Eating Human Flesh at Food Conference as Emergency Measure for Climate Change. So Granted, he does throw in there as emergency measure. However, there just seems to me to be so many other options. But anyway, um, the professor here is obviously a believer in climate change, and whether you are or not, maybe you're a climate change denier, maybe you're middle of the road, or maybe you're saying, hey, we only have X amount of years, maybe 12 years, something like that. So no matter where you are in those camps, I don't think it's foolish to plan for the future and to consider that there could be food shortages. So whether it's the IPCC saying that global warming is going to cause food shortages, whether it is NASA saying that a solar minimum is going to occur that's going to bring about a mini ice age, and that we're actually going to have about a decade or so of cooler temperatures in which a certain swath of land in the northern and southern hemisphere, I forget the exact latitude, but they are stating that a certain part of Canada and somewhere else in the southern hemisphere, that all across the globe in those two hemispheres at a certain latitude, we're going to miss a certain chunk of global land due to frost. So whether it's that, whether it is a regional or global situation brought about by flooding, or even drought. We've seen Texas recently had a lot of flooding. Last year, Nebraska had horrible flooding. I read somewhere that they estimate 1 million calves alone, in Nebraska alone, were drowned in that one episode of flooding just last year. Or we could look to Venezuela, and sure, that one might not be necessarily influenced much by the weather. One could argue that it's strictly political and economical. Fair enough. So even if you are a climate change denier, we can look and we can see throughout history, whether it was from weather or not, there have been food shortages. We can look at the Dust Bowl in our country, in the early, in the, what was it, the 1930s or so. You can look at in biblical times, Joseph and the famine in Egypt. Shoot, I was just at Walmart this week, at a large Walmart superstore here in my town. There were no salads. Anything that was refrigerated. Well, some of the freezers were working, but all of the produce, all of the eggs, all of the veggies that need refrigeration, all the salads, they were gone and empty because something happened to the refrigeration system. So it's not super far-fetched to consider that there could be food shortages, whether it's a couple days. To be quite honest, I've heard that our delivery systems for our grocery stores is somewhat fragile. It wouldn't take a major disruption for there not to be food on the shelves for a couple days, and we've seen that a couple times to smaller degrees on the East Coast. But my point is, I don't think it's foolish to plan for some food shortages. Whether you believe in climate change or not, they could still come. So again, this isn't a video about climate change, whether it can happen or not. That's a completely different topic. I think the jump is, okay, let's say that food shortages are on the horizon. Is cannibalism a legitimate solution to that challenge? I would say no. But let's dive into what this professor had to say. So, climate change alarmism has taken a macabre turn that looks like satire but isn't. Again, this isn't an article from The Onion. This is reality. It happened in Sweden. At a summit for Food of the Future called Gastro Summit in Stockholm on September 3rd to 4th, a professor held a PowerPoint presentation asserting that we must awaken the idea of eating human flesh in the future as a way of combating the effects of climate change. Again, if you're turned off by climate change, fine, fair enough. Combating food shortages. In a talk titled, Can You Imagine Eating Human Flesh? Behavioral scientist and marketing strategist Magnus Soderlund from the Stockholm School of Economics argued for the breaking down of ancient taboos against desecrating the human corpse and eating human flesh. He refers to the taboos against it as conservative and discusses people's resistance to it as a problem that could be overcome little by little, beginning with persuading people to just taste it. Kind of like Nike, just do it. No, we're going to just taste it. Sorry. He can be seen in his video presentation and on Swedish channel TV4 saying that since food sources will be scarce in the future, okay, fair enough, that could be, People must be introduced to eating things they have thus far considered disgusting, among them human flesh. Easier cells, he suggests, include pets and insects. By the way, they have been eating pets and zoo animals in Venezuela. Many people have been fleeing the country to neighboring nations to try and find better sources of food. To be honest, I don't really have a problem with the insect part. Fine with that. It does say, but human flesh was the central topic. In Swedish articles describing this new debate, the term, I'm going to butcher that, människoköttsbranschen, is introduced. This means the human flesh industry. So apparently this is already a debate going on in Sweden. Skip down here. He says people can be tricked into making the right decisions. Conflating resistance to eating human flesh with capitalist selfishness, the seminar's talking points ask, are we humans too selfish to live sustainably? And that may be true. Maybe we are too selfish. But I think it's a jump to say, hey, we're selfish. That means now we should be cannibalistic. And here's some more talking points that occurred in his presentation. Is cannibalism the solution to food sustainability in the future? Does Generation Z have the answers to our food challenges? Maybe they do. Can consumers be tricked into making the right decisions? So is he implying that we are making wrong decisions if we are saying no to cannibalism? That seems a bit far-fetched to me. At Gastro Summit, you'll get some answers to these questions and also partake in the latest scientific findings and get to meet the leading experts. When he asked the people at the conference how many would be open to the idea of tasting flesh, 8% of the participants said they would be open to trying it. He also said he would be open to at least tasting it. Goes on to say here, the article, what Soderlund doesn't mention, curiously, is the long documented science on the biological effects of cannibalism. I'm going to get more into this because I don't think this article touched on all of the horrible consequences that could come about from cannibalism, but a tribe called the Foray lived in isolation in Papua New Guinea until the 1930s. They believed in eating their dead rather than allowing them to be consumed by worms. So it was a way to honor their dead. This led to an epidemic of a disease called Kuru, or the Laughing Death, caused by ingestion of human flesh. This disease wasn't caused by a pathogen, but rather a twisted protein, which is known as a prion. I'll get into that later. That tricks other proteins in the brain to twist like it, damaging the brain's cerebellum. Researchers compared it to Dr. Jekyll's transformation. The last victim of Kuru died in 2009. I'm assuming that means the last Kuru victim in the Foray tribe in Papua New Guinea. But perhaps worldwide, maybe there hasn't been much more of it. Again, there's 9 places on Earth where it's still happening. Doesn't mean they're necessarily combating Kuru at the present time. So anyway, if you're not turned off by cannibalism, as I am, just by the thought of eating, whether it's a family member, a neighbor, an enemy, I don't want to eat any of them, then perhaps the Laughing Death would turn you off. If not, take a look here at some of the side effects of eating human flesh. Cannibalism increases risk of prion disease and eventually death. This is from Medical Daily. I'll skip down here to the pertinent paragraphs pertaining to our talk. Says here, so can eating humans be nutritious for our health? Not exactly. Our entire body is approximately 81,000 calories. The thigh is about 10,000 calories, and the heart is 700 calories. Close to half of these calories come from adipose, I'm not familiar with that term, or fat tissue, which makes us the less healthy option for dieters. Anecdotal accounts suggest we taste somewhere between pork and veal, while a culinary robot has identified us as bacon. Now, I love bacon, but I do draw the line here at human flesh. And if you're not quite sure if you do yet, well, listen to the next 2 paragraphs. Eating human meat becomes risky due to the presence of prions, versions of normal protein that had their shape altered, losing their function and becoming infectious. These distorted proteins can influence other similarly healthy proteins and change them, causing a chain reaction and creating disease. Specifically, prion disease creates holes in the brain, giving it a spongiform appearance and ultimately causes death. Here's the scary part. Unlike viruses, bacteria, fungi, or parasitic infections, which contain DNA or RNA, prions do not, which means they can't be eradicated with radiation or heat. So, cooking the meat is not going to solve this potential deadly disease from spreading. They could be present in any nervous tissue, including our organs and muscles. So, oftentimes we hear, hey, it's just the brain you got to steer clear from. And I did read that prions are more likely to be found in the human brain, but they can also be in any tissue, any organ, any muscle. They are most common in the brain and spinal nerve tissues. In the case of the Foray tribe, I forget if it was the women and the children were told to eat one part. I forget if they were told to eat the brain or if it was the men that ate the brain predominantly. But nevertheless, men, women, and children, all of them succumbed to the disease because even those who weren't eating the brain ritualistically were still getting these prions and succumbing to kuru. So rather crazy what is happening. Now, if that's not enough, the most bizarre thing happened this week. This is a story from Newsweek. We see here, Eat the Babies. Twitter reacts to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez town hall meeting. You can see here on this woman's shirt, it says, Save the planet, eat the children. Now, AOC, in her defense, has come out and said that this was a Trump supporter, that this was a plant, whether someone in the Trump administration did this, whether she's just a Trump supporter and thought this would be a great idea to give negative ratings to AOC, or, as AOC also suggested, maybe she's just got some mental issues. We shouldn't be making fun of her. I don't know. At the end of the day, what most concerns me, I guess, is two things. One, I watched the video. I'll put the link on below my video in the comment section. You can watch it. Two things that concern me the most is, as I'm listening to her, the reactions of the people in the crowd, while being one of disbelief, aren't as extreme as I would think. This lady is recommending that we eat our children, that we eat babies, live babies. I mean, I guess after killing them, but still, killing them, eating them. Unbelievable that I didn't see more gasping, more jaws on the floor, more head turning. But the most disturbing thing to me is AOC's reaction. So maybe this was a Trump supporter. Maybe she was mental and has, some mental issues going on. And again, like AOC said, we shouldn't make fun of her. I agree with that. But AOC at no point in her response condemns this solution. She said there are many solutions. At the very least, I would have liked to have heard AOC say, hey, I appreciate your enthusiasm for wanting to combat climate change. However, we should focus on some more humane issues to solving the problem rather than resorting to eating human flesh, to eating babies. Take it for what you will. Again, I don't know if she was a plant, if it was an act, who knows? But my whole thought about all of this, there was also a Newsweek article that came out, and it was admittedly against cannibalism, but at the end, they do kind of leave the door open. They use the phrase, for now. For now, we, the authors, are against this taboo. But I just sometimes wonder, are some of these articles, are some of these things that we're seeing and hearing about, are they just people testing the water to see how the public is going to react? I certainly don't want kuru. Here's the other crazy thing about prions and kuru that I found out is that the disease can lie dormant and latent in our bodies for up to 50 years. The average amount of years that it lied dormant was 14. But what's nuts is we could have a food shortage. We could resort to cannibalism, hopefully not, God forbid. We start eating human flesh, and then we get through the food shortage in a couple of years. What's crazy is your children and your grandchildren could still be dying off because of kuru, even though they never ate any flesh, but because their parent or grandparent ate it, they now have that twisted protein that lied dormant within them for decades, and now it's manifesting. my question is, why not look to vertical gardening? Why not look to seed banking? Why not look to helping farmers in your area, or get on Kiva? Do some research. Look at the regions that you think will be most affected by food shortages or even by climate change, and support some of those farmers. Um, help them with a microloan to do what they need to do. I think farmers should study up at storage. I think they should look at what crops they could change to that are more drought resistant, that are more flood resistant, that are more versatile. I think it would be wise for all of us to look into some food storage. There's some great products you can get that have 25-year shelf life. And if you don't have a lot of money, start small. Buy a few things here and there. Buy some peanut butter. Have extra food and water, um, stored in your home for at least, I would say, a couple of months. Something that can get you through a summer or get you through a winter. And then as you get close to the expiration date, you eat that food. You just keep replacing it. I don't think there's anything foolish about that. And for those, again, who don't have a lot of means, just start out in a small way. But certainly, cannibalism has to be a last ditch resort, and eating babies, in my mind. There are so many things we can do to combat a food shortage. So I hope you liked my video. If so, please like, share, subscribe. Take care, and God bless. And let's eat healthy. Till next time. Bye.